the New York Yankees. And we could talk about Brian Cashman. What are the Yankees going to do with him? I believe he's staying. He is the mastermind of this organization. He was the gift that keeps on giving. As far as George Steinbrenner, before he passed away, he made sure that Brian Cashman was going to be in office and be important to this organization as Hal Steinbrenner took over for the team. Now, over the last couple of years, the Yankees can't get over the hump, maybe because Houston cheated. That's not an excuse. Maybe because the Red Sox have just been better. And the Rays have been a great organization. They find players, they take players from other teams, and they turn them into stars. But to me right now, the starting pitching needs to be fixed. Gerrit Cole, making $326 million after the deal that he got 2 years ago, has laid up not one but two duds in the playoffs. That is not a good sign for the Yankees, especially when Gerrit Cole is getting older. 31 years old now. Pitchers start to fall apart at 35. So what does he have? 3, maybe 4 good years left. So they got to win with Gerrit Cole. Luis Severino, he missed 2.5 years. He comes back, they put him in the bullpen, and lays up a dud in the playoffs. That's a problem. You bring in Corey Kluber. Corey Kluber couldn't stay healthy. When he did stay healthy, he had the no-hitter this year, and he pitched well. Are they going to bring him back? I don't think the Yankees will. And Aaron Boone, the great Aaron Boone, who I have nothing against Aaron Boone. I don't know if they're going to win with him, but he has a winning record ever since he's taken over this team, which says a lot about him and his managing opportunity in the regular season. But in the playoffs, he has not done well for the New York Yankees. And he has run this bullpen, which was a top bullpen in baseball for 30 years, into the ground. So Brian Cashman has a lot of decisions to make. Is he going to bring Gary Sanchez back? You got to get rid of him. They got to find another catcher, a veteran catcher, or they bring in a rookie catcher that they have in their farm system and start building around him. Aaron Judge needs to be signed in the offseason. They have to decide what they're going to give him, how they're going to pay him, and bring him back. He's already spoken. He says he wants to be in pinstripes for the rest of his life. I believe he really wants to stay with the Yankees. I don't believe he wants to go anywhere else but stay with the Yankees. He had a sensational season. He was one of the big reasons why the Yankees made the playoffs. They can't get rid of Giancarlo Stanton. He has a no-trade clause. And he had a good season. For a guy that started off really slow, at the end of the season, he was the hottest hitter for the New York Yankees. They got to decide what they're doing with DJ LeMahieu. Is he going to be their third baseman? Is he going to be their second baseman? I really believe they should shift Gleyber Torres to second base. When they moved him to second base in the middle of the season, he started playing good baseball. He is not a good shortstop. That means you move DJ LeMahieu to third base when he gets healthy with this hernia, which definitely affected the Yankees in their lineup. And they got to decide, do they bring up Volpe, the young kid who was a top 15 prospect in baseball this year if he plays well in spring training, or do you wait until the middle of the season and bring him in? You bring in a veteran type of player to help out at shortstop. And then at first base, do they bring back Rizzo? There's not many positions that they need to fill in anymore. This lineup is pretty secure, except at catcher and probably first base. The Yankees are secure at almost every single position. Joey Gallo's coming back. He's under contract for another year. Their outfield is packed. Giancarlo Stanton, Aaron Judge. We know what the Yankees are. They're a powered team. They need to find players that they can bring in that can hit for average and help out when some of these players get hurt. Gio Urshela is probably going to be gone. This bullpen needs to be fixed. Britton has not worked out for the Yankees. Chapman has not worked out for the Yankees for almost 2 years. The middle of the bullpen has been horrible. Loaisiga, to me, has been the best bullpen pitcher for the Yankees for the last 2 years. So either you move him to the closing position or move him to the eighth inning and you decide what you're doing filling in the seventh, because Chad Green is getting torched at the end of the season. This team needs to be rebuilt. This is still a winning team. This is still an organization that could win 95 to 100 games next year with the lineup and the players that they have right now, but they're not going to win. There are pieces that need to be filled in. Brian Cashman needs to figure that puzzle out and help the Yankees get back on track and win another World Series, because they've been waiting for number 28 for a long time.
The biggest problem, I think, with the hitting, has been the strikeouts, and the Yankees need more of those types of guys. You mentioned the outfield is very good with Stanton and Judge and Gallo when he plays, but they don't really have that center field speed type that can get on base percentage, steal bases. They're missing that kind of element to the game. The other question is shortstop, too. If somebody like Velasquez is going to be on the roster. You mentioned Volpe is another guy. I think Urshela's gone to. And catcher. It's a fluky position, so it might be hard to find. It might be something where they might get a veteran for 1 year. Do they trust some of their young guys in their farm system to be called up? Maybe they go with a platoon. We've seen teams carry 3 catchers as well. But you mentioned the biggest thing. The Yankees bullpen has been overworked so much where they kind of all fell off at once. Aroldis Chapman was great in the beginning of the season, and then everybody realized he was using all the sticky substances. And then all of a sudden he wasn't the same. Zach Britton, he's been hurt all the time and didn't come back at all. So where do they go from here? I think the Yankees' bigger problem, too, is they have to get more of a modern bullpen. They have a traditional type bullpen that worked for a while, but now the game is changing with the 3-batter minimums, with the analytics, with the openers, that pitchers have to be more versatile in general, and I think the Yankees need to have an adjustment process with that kind of thing. They tried it with Severino out of the bullpen. It didn't really work. They tried it with Montgomery at certain points. It didn't really work. They need more of those types of guys, though, because if one guy doesn't play well, they need more depth in general.
I think with the Yankees, they also have to decide what they're doing with this pitching staff, and the most important thing, who's going to be their manager? Is it going to be Aaron Boone? Are the Yankees going to extend him? It doesn't make sense to me to extend a guy that has not done very well in the playoffs. This is a team that's built for the playoffs, not the regular season. I can't throw Aaron Boone under the bus because I think he's been a good manager. I think he's been a top 5 manager in baseball. But when it comes to the playoffs, if you don't win, you don't win. And if the Yankees don't win, you get fired. Joe Girardi was with the Yankees for 11 years, almost consistently went to the playoffs, but he only won 1 time. Aaron Boone has been here for 4 years. He hasn't won once in the playoffs. And for the Yankees not to win 1 time in the playoffs in 4 years or even go to a World Series, I understand Yankee fans are going to say Houston cheated. Well, the Yankees cheated too. Right now where the Yankees are positioned, they're not going to win. And I know a lot of people think, fire Brian Cashman. Brian Cashman is not getting fired.
No.
Because if he gets fired, there will be teams lining up, including the New York Mets, lining up for him. He will be signed within 5 minutes. Brian Cashman will be on everybody's wish list before anybody. Any player, he will be the first person that everybody will want to sign. So the Yankees are not going to just give away their GM, who has really built this team every single year to be a winning organization. The Yankees have a winning record for over 30 years. Right. There's no professional team in professional sports that have ever done that. They make the playoffs. They just don't win the championship. And that doesn't work for Hal Steinbrenner, and that's not going to work for the Steinbrenner family. They spend a lot of money, they make a lot of money, and the fans expect a lot from this organization.
When you look at the conceptual management that Aaron Boone has done, he did some good things, but he's definitely still some flaws. There were stretches where he didn't recognize that, all right, maybe I have to be a little more creative with this bullpen because these guys are hurt or these guys are down. And that's a big problem when you're looking at this particular game. Now, granted, some of them worked out. I was surprised they brought Clay Holmes in when they did after Gerrit Cole was struggling. Still kind of a weird decision. Loaizaga, like you mentioned, I think is the guy that goes with going forward. He's their versatile guy that can serve in many different roles. Maybe he's an 8th inning guy, maybe he's a stretch guy, maybe he's somebody that can go multiple innings. So there's definitely options there, but I feel like Aaron Boone, sometimes he did better with less, and then all of a sudden when he had more, he kind of either overthought it or just trusted their players too much, and as a result, that's why they've had a lot of trouble with the playoffs. They've beaten the Twins, okay, big whoop, they're never good in the playoffs anyway. They probably should have beaten the Astros, but even so, that's only 1 series out of you losing to the Red Sox a bunch of times, all these other playoff series, and that's a big problem when your best playoff identity is against a team that's just terrible in the playoffs, in the Twins.
And then there's the Mets. Fired Rojas. I wasn't surprised they were going to fire him at the end of the season. This is a team that should have made the playoffs. The money that they spent in the offseason, Stevie Cohen wants to make the playoffs. He wants to challenge all these teams in the National League East, which a lot of people thought they were the best team in the National League East before the season started. Jacob deGrom couldn't stay healthy. He was on a tear. He was breaking records. And then some of the pieces that they brought in the offseason, they brought back Stroman. Syndergaard was expected to come back. This whole pitching staff, which was supposed to be a dominant force, turned out to be a bust of a pitching staff. Then the bullpen, the money that they spent for May and some of the acquisitions that they made in the offseason turned into being duds. And Betances really couldn't stay healthy. The Mets are going to have to decide with some of these players in this pitching staff on where they want to go in the offseason, how much money they want to spend. Lindor really wasn't the player they thought he was. Now, it was 1 year. If he does it a second year in a row, the Mets are in a lot of trouble because they signed him to almost a 12-year deal worth about $33 million a year. You're paying a guy that's not producing in New York. That's scary because we've seen a lot of ex-Mets or veteran players that the Mets have brought in that have not succeeded in New York and with the Mets. They have to decide what they're doing with Javier Baez, Mr. Thumbs Down. Are they going to pay him $180, $170 million, which he's going to be asking for? I have no idea. Steve Cohen's going to have to also decide what his outfield is. Mr. Crybaby in the right field, and we all know who I'm talking about. Are they going to bring him back? Who honestly is just a pretty face and he can't swing the bat in the important parts of the game. Davis probably is not coming back next year. They have a lot of different positions they need to fill in, and they need to hit for average. This is a big problem for the New York Mets for years. They can't hit for average. They're one of the worst hitting teams in baseball. And with pitching, that's great. You have a great pitching squad that pitches pretty much 3/4 of the season, pitches very well. And then this last half of the season, they play like crap.
The Mets have a lot of these same types of players. Obviously, Lindor and Baez are both well-rounded at their peak. Lindor had a bad year this past season. We'll see if he bounces back, but he's still a well-rounded player, and so is Baez. Alonso, obviously, too. But the rest of them are all that
I won't say anything bad about Pete.
Right. Those three are fine if Lindor is at his peak. But still, J.D. Davis, Dominic Smith, Michael Conforto, all very similar types. Fluky hitters at times. Smith is good against lefties. Defensively at first base is good if they go to a universal DH, and Alonso could DH more often. Not that Alonso's bad at first base, but Smith is great. Like the Yankees, they need a little more of those hitting for average type hitters. Situational hitting has been a huge problem for the Mets. The Mets in 2020 in the shortened season were the second best team in on-base percentage, and they scored I think the third least runs. That's a problem. That's management, but it's also management that goes back even before Rojas, with Callaway, with Terry Collins even. And in terms of their pitching, it'll be interesting to see with them if they bring back Taijuan Walker, who had a nice first half but struggled in the second half on a one-year deal. Marcus Stroman, will he take a qualifying offer? I'm worried they're going to overpay for him. If they take a qualifying offer, fine, but that worries me otherwise. And Noah Syndergaard, too. I only want them to do a qualifying offer, no more with him.
It's going to be very interesting with the New York Mets and where they're going to go as their manager. They had a chance to bring in Carlos Beltran. They decided to part ways with him, and they brought in Rojas. I think they should have let Carlos Beltran take over the team. I think it was a big mistake for the Mets. It definitely has smacked them in the back of the head. Now, there are a couple of good managers. Maybe Joe Girardi, if he becomes available. Do the Mets bring in Joe Girardi to take over the organization? I could see that happening. He's a New York guy. I think he would fit very, very well with New York, with the New York Mets if the Yankees don't decide they want to bring Joe Girardi back. There has to be a good manager. They have to bring in a guy, a good baseball mind to help out, and they need to figure out what they're doing as far as their GM is concerned. Is Sandy Alderson coming back? Are they going to bring in a big-name guy? That's going to be a huge problem for the Mets in the offseason. And guess what? Mr. Uncle Stevie is going to have to open up his pockets if he expects this team to get the players and the coaches they want to do to win. As far as the playoffs are concerned, we expect that the Red Sox and the Tampa Bay Rays series is going to be fun to watch. I'm very intrigued with what the Rays have done so far throughout the regular season and going to the playoffs. I expect the Rays to be right there with all the good teams. Houston in the National League, I was very surprised that the Cardinals lost that game in the ninth inning. The Dodgers are now moving on. They're a dangerous team. They have a dangerous squad. They have the most talent of all the teams in the playoffs. So I expect the Dodgers to put up a good fight all the way to the end and maybe win a back-to-back World Series. We haven't seen that really since the Yankees in the 90s. So maybe we see it again with the Dodgers and the dominance of the Dodgers with the pitching staff. Scherzer pitched very well the other day. So I expect the Dodgers to play well throughout this season. So baseball is going to be fun. The playoffs are always fun. So I'm very interested to see what happens as we move forward in the baseball playoffs.